Atrocities of Michigan Indigenous Boarding Schools by Lannon. Contents. First, I will discuss an introduction to Native boarding schools in the United States and provide a general who, what, when, where, and how for context. Then I will describe the boarding schools that existed in Michigan with a primary emphasis on Harbor Springs and Mount Pleasant. Finally, I will describe the movement to acknowledge these schools and the actions committed in them in Michigan and across the nation, with attention to what is being done to correct the errors made in the creation and execution of such schools. What exactly were Indigenous boarding schools? These facilities were created with the intent of civilizing Indigenous children into European cultures, and thus stripping away their religion, culture, and languages, often forcibly, resulting in physical, mental, and emotional abuse. These institutions existed from the early 19th century into the mid-20th century across North America through federal funding and cultural support. Native boarding schools in Michigan existed in Baraga, Michigan, Harbor Springs, and Mount Pleasant. The first mission school in Little Traverse was founded in 1829, and in the next 2 decades, more followed in Cross Village, Middle Village, and Burt Lake. Before the War of 1812, Native relations were well in the region, and many Ottawa natives voluntarily converted to Catholicism and accepted European practices. After the War of 1812, relations took a turn for the worst, and changes to Native life were involuntary, and many families faced poverty, pushing them to allow the children to go to boarding schools to avoid hard home lives. The Holy Childhood Boarding School was prominent in Harbor Springs, having existed from 1889 until 1983. The treatment of this school was grueling and inflicting physical and mental abuse, with one testimony remarking, "I have less hair on this side of my head because the nun was right-handed, so she would reach out and grab me on the left side of my head and drag me around, and then use my face and head as a dust eraser." From Yvonne Keshik, an 8-year attendee of the Holy Childhood Boarding School. Another prominent location in Michigan where a boarding school existed was Mount Pleasant, where the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial School was located from 1893 until 1934. On average, 300 Native children passed through per year over the 41-year history of the institution, housing children from kindergarten until 8th grade in 37 buildings on 320 acres. Days in the school were spent mostly on manual labor, with basic schooling as well. Treatment here was similar to the rest, with intense abuse. Around 200 children lost their lives while at this school. From 1934 until 2008, the building was repurposed for convicted but mentally ill men. A year later, July 17, 2009, a Healing and Forgiveness March was held by the Native and non-Native activists in honor of the children who died there. In 2011, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe of Indians bought the properties, including the campus and cemetery, to be kept as a site of conscience. In 2018, it was further added along with the Mission Creek Cemetery to the National Register of Historic Places. Finally, the movement to recognize Native boarding schools both Michigan-wide and across the nation. The motives of the movement are centered around awareness, honor, and accountability. Awareness of the lives lost and lives impacted, and awareness of the erasure of Indigenous culture. Honor to the brave and strong children who made it through these schools, and accountability for the grievances experienced. In Michigan, the 87th anniversary of the closing of the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial School was celebrated June 4th, 2021, through prayer, drum performance, and historical lessons. Nationwide, Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, announced the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, with the final report due April 2022. In Michigan, tribes are hoping for this process to be transparent and include investigation of both the schools and the records, with the understanding that this history is not that far off, with many alive today having experienced such. The ultimate goal is this recognition, the loss of Native Michigan culture and life, and to repair to the best of our abilities those damaging actions and build positive relations after such point.